Hi, everyone. My name is Derek Iverson. For those who don't know me, I'm a city councillor here in Oshawa's Ward 4, which includes the downtown, and decided to record this video to share some information on an issue that has caught a lot of attention in the last 2 weeks related to the downtown murals. About 2 weeks ago, for maybe those who don't have some of the background, about 2 weeks ago, there was a report that was issued, and the report included some recommendations in it. It was actually quite a wide-ranging report, but the part that a lot of people had focused on was that it included a recommendation to decommission the majority of the murals that have been downtown Oshawa for many years, that we've had since they started going up in about the mid 1990s, late 1990s. And there are 15 of them, and of those 14 are being recommended for decommissioning. And the report that this was found in was actually part of a much larger process that comes out of our public art master plan that helps to guide decision-making into the future on public art in the city of Oshawa. And the piece that people have been, I would say, most concerned about is this recommendation to do the decommissioning. One of the things that hasn't been discussed a lot, both in the present conversation, but also in many years past, is that public art of this sort is temporary. And, it's not something that I would expect an everyday person to know, including myself. I'm not an expert in public art. Um, But when you get into painting and it's out and exposed to the elements, it's known that it's not going to last forever. It does have a lifespan on it. For instance, if you were to compare architecture or sculpture, they tend to last longer. They do still need some restoration and treatment done to them, but in the long run, in terms of the lifespans, paint, even if it's an acrylic paint that is a little bit more resilient than other forms of paint, there is a lifespan. It's not going to last forever, and that is known. So the conversation that has emerged over the last couple of weeks has been one where maybe the information has been fairly narrow. And I thought I would make this video to try and share some of the rest of the information that doesn't seem to be getting out there quite as much. And to do this, part of the exercise was that I decided to actually go in person myself, sort of do some field visits and look at some of these pieces and take a look at the condition of some of them. So when you see them from a distance like this is one that is right on Center Street, attached to the parking garage there between King and Bond. You look at it from a distance and you don't really notice anything, in particular. It looks like the painting is fine or complete. But once you actually start coming up close, then you start to see that there are deterioration issues with it and damage. And you also see stuff like this. So you're going to start to see where it's bubbling out. It's starting, the integrity of the paint is starting to deteriorate as a whole. And this is what you see in some areas, but then you don't know sort of what the future might look like for other areas where it's only starting to show some of its age. But this is failure of the paint. You can't just paint over this to restore it. It has to be completely scraped off and redone in order to do some of the restoration here. You also see things like this, so where you have a white undercoat, and then in this case, there's a field of blue. You can see here where the paint is completely fading that way. So it's not just that the paint is changing, but it's actually deteriorating and disappearing in the elements. So it's exposed to temperature fluctuations. Here you can see it fading, you can see it cracking, humidity fluctuations, weather, rain, snow, direct exposure to sunlight. And sunlight is actually very bad for any types of paint. It deteriorates. You can see this stuff is just completely fading and cracking. When you see these types of cracks, you're actually starting to see where this is not just the paint failing, but this is the structure underneath it that's starting to fail. So you can see here the frame. Some of them have frames that are starting to rot out, but the structure underneath it is actually a styrofoam. And you can see here, like, it's just this total structural failure starting to happen here when you look up closer. It's a styrofoam with when you see these paintings, what they are is they're a styrofoam, the whole thing, it's a bunch of styrofoam panels, and then there's a sort of a border around it, and then the initial preparation of the surface, it was like a mesh and kind of like a plaster material that then went over it, and then that's what got painted onto. So you can see the fading in this one, even from far away in a lot of the places. But, as we get closer, we start to see not just fading, but structural failure. So this isn't something that you just fix with some more paint or fresh paint. It's hard to say how, you would actually fix it. You have to rebuild the original materials. Uh, it really becomes visible once you get up close. Here's one that is totally deteriorating. And this is where you get into a point where they actually start to look really shabby. This does not look good. This is not just, oh, we need a little bit of paint on it. This is falling apart. And again, this is the natural life cycle of outdoor painted public art. They reach an end of life. There have been some suggestions, why don't we get some students to from some high school art programs to restore it. This is not a job for student artists. Preservation is a highly skilled, art preservation is a highly skilled field. You have to get years of training. It is expensive to hire people to do it. And it's, some people have said, leave them alone. Geez, we can't just leave them alone is not an option. This is what happens when leave them alone is the choice. They're going to start to look worse and worse. And, time is not going to be friendly to them. The elements have not been friendly to them. They're now a quarter century old. You can see these are structural cracks. Again, not just a coat of paint to fix this. You have whole chunks that are coming out in some areas. Look at this, entire fields of red that are now starting to look like the original brushstrokes and don't look good anymore. Same thing here, a big field of blue that's deteriorated. This is, maybe there's an analogy here that I can use, since cars is such a sort of a popular theme. So if you think about when you own a car and you first buy it, maybe it's new, maybe it's used, and in a few years you have to start spending some money on some repair work and replacing. Maybe a transmission goes, and that's thousands of dollars to replace that. Think about when cars start to get really old, and you start to say, do we keep putting money into this? Because more money going into it is not really going to extend the lifespan of this car. It reaches a point where you have to say, okay, this car's done. It's got hundreds of thousands of kilometers on it. There is a constant list of repairs that it's going to need. We repair this, and then that's going to break. It's sort of the same thing with this, with public art. It reaches a lifespan horizon. And then you start to think about replacing it. This is another one coming up Simcoe Street, quite an iconic one. I'm actually going to jump back to this one because there's sort of an interesting, and to do this, I've just got to stop sharing here and let me just switch over my screen. There's quite an interesting thing that you can see when it's very telling when we bring this up. And I did this when I was out taking pictures, where I brought it up on Google Street View, and you can actually learn quite a bit. So I've got these side by side here. This is the painting that I went to and took a photo of it. And Google Street View, actually, you can go back to old photos. Here's 2009, so 15 years ago. Look at the difference. This vibrant green with sharp lines and a blue sky and clouds. Look at it now. You couldn't touch this up. You would have to completely repaint over the entire thing to get it looking good again. Look at how faded it is. And I think that that's been part of what's been missing from the conversation these last couple of weeks. People say, oh, geez, $430,000 to do whatever it is that is being proposed. And that's a number that I think has been where the facts have sort of been lost in the number. If you look at, the viability of restoration, and that we may be beyond that point. And again, it's part of the natural life cycle of public art. That 430,000 or so dollars, it seems like a big number, but it's actually over a half a decade time horizon. If you look at the plan that's laid out in the report, it actually breaks it down. So the decommissioning cost is usually a couple $1,000s, a few $1,000s, depending on how complicated it is, for a piece that's being decommissioned. And then a replacement cost can be anywhere from thousands to tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the size, the complexity, things like that. So if you take that and multiply that out over 14 pieces, plus there is the one that is being looked at for restoration, the result is cumulatively, that's what the cost is, but split that up every year over 5 years, and it's a much smaller number, and it's part of a long-term plan to continue this evolution and this transformation of public art and additions, and then the ones that are now past their date, and then we replace them with something new. That's really what the bigger picture here is about. And I think, unfortunately, over the last 2 weeks, there's been information that hasn't made its way into that bigger discussion that's been happening as a community. And really, it's been limited to only some very specific pieces of information. And, I can understand why people are frustrated, why some of them are upset right now. Because there's been some information that has not been brought into the conversation. That's why I wanted to make this video today. I have heard also from some people who are upset. We've heard from residents who have been upset that they haven't been part of the process. Where is the public participation in this? One of the things I will say about that is that there's two things to know. One of them is that when committee and council agendas get published for the public, that is part of inviting people in if they want to have feedback. So that hasn't been shed out. That is part of the process for sure. But in 2023, last year, over several months, as the bigger part of this process that's been undertaken, part of it was public feedback as well. Over almost 200 people did participate, provide feedback on the current art that's there, the murals that are starting to age and deteriorate, as well as what they would like to see for future public art, future murals, how they want to see the decisions sort of be informed in future. So there has been public participation through that channel. There's the opportunity currently. What I encourage people to do, if you didn't know about that opportunity to provide feedback last year, make sure that you're on the city's email list. Make sure you follow the city's social media channels, because that's oftentimes where those types of things are announced, or where the call is put out for people to participate in these activities as they come up. And I think another important thing that can't be lost here, and I want to share one more thing on screen with you, is that we're not it's not like we did all of this in the late 1990s and then stopped doing public art in Oshawa. In a way, that sort of was the genesis period that then has this continued doing public art. So the original volunteers that were part of that can be proud that it started this way. Here's one of the most recent ones, just an absolutely spectacular piece by Danny Crosby outside the McMillan Street Parkade. I think it's over 4 stories high. Make sure you go and see that one. It was just unveiled recently. What else? We've got, there's also examples where private businesses and owners have decided to pick up on that thread and do their own. So this is one that's on a side street going up Simcoe. There's another one on the opposite side. But again, these ones are getting older. They're starting to fade. They'll need to be either retouched or replaced with new works. There's this one. We've got this really vibrant one just on over on, I think it's on Albert Street, and or maybe it's Salina Street, but just really beautiful, very vibrant, to refresh things in that area. We've got this one that you can see coming up Simcoe Street, behind the Canadian Automotive Museum. And then along City Hall, you've got these pieces that were done by through a program with Durham College arts students. And these ones are done knowing that they have a life cycle, because these change actually every couple of years with a new cohort of students. They come in and do new ones here that are installed on panels, and then they're replaced every couple of years. We've also added these. This is up on the art gallery to commemorate the Painters 11. There's this sculpture that's outside of City Hall. So public art hasn't stopped. This is the Arts Resource Center that was added several years ago. These ones change every couple of years. Same thing with having some of the students do some of the art there. So it's not like the journey ended. back in the late 1990s, where they got all this public art out, the murals, and then that's the end of the journey, and now we have this forever. It's an evolving journey. It's a changing one. It's like seasons. There is replacement that then, replaces the plants from last year. It's the same kind of idea that with each generation, there's new ones that can come along and change. Some can be restored. Some aren't viable for restoration. But in the long run, really, public art reflects change. And I hope that we can start to bring that into the conversation in the next couple of weeks as we look ahead on this. There's been a very wide spectrum of ways that people have expressed their thoughts on it. Some of it very respectful and very passionate, but respectful. There have been some that, maybe if they had the chance to reflect on some of the language that they've used, some of it is quite unkind. And we can have passionate civic dialogues and discourses about issues that we care about. And you can include passion and still include respect. We can care about things. We can even be upset about things and then find ways of conveying that and participating in that civic discourse so that we all have our dignity held high throughout all of it. And I hope that we can do that as we go forward. I hope that this information has been helpful. Please, if you have questions, put them in the comment section. I'll do my best to get back to you. I hope we can keep this conversation going, and I hope that we can find ways to look ahead and see how public art is going to transform and evolve in the years ahead. So thank you for watching. Bye for now, and please keep participating in the civic discussions in our community.